Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel. So it's Friday, so that means it's time for another Friday Reads video. And I think I have a few things to talk about this week because I have, in the last few days, finished 4 books that I was reading. And I'm currently reading 4 books. Had to check my list. And I'm about to start 2 more here sooner rather than later, so let's go. So the first book I finished in the past week was Under the Udala Trees. I did this by Chinelo, Okparanta. I did this as a buddy read with Scott and Nell of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and I think Scott and Nell pretty well summed it up in their Friday Reads video when they said that this novel was lacking in being good. So this book tells the story of Ijeoma, whose family is impacted negatively by the Nigerian Civil War, because if you lived in Biafra, whose family wasn't negatively impacted by the Nigerian Civil War, right? And then because of the devastation caused to her family, Ijeoma has to go live as a house girl, basically, for a number of years with another family. And while she's there, she meets another girl and falls in love with her. And so it's kind of an exploration of what happens once Ijeoma realizes that she is a lesbian and does not feel the same feelings for men that she is supposed to feel. So that's pretty much the premise of the book, but I did not, and I appreciated what Chinelo Okparanta is trying to do here, because there's a note at the end that talks about how in 2014 the president of Nigeria signed a bill into law criminalizing same-sex relationships, and so in her own way the author is trying to give voice to that marginalized community of Nigeria, and I definitely appreciate that message, but I do not think as a novel this book was executed particularly well. There are too many things that happen. There is not enough interiority on the part of our main character and narrator, Ijeoma. In fact, half the time I even forgot what her name was, because she just never sort of lingers on herself. She's always just talking about, you know, other people, and, you know, and then we did this and this and this and whatever. So yeah, I really wanted a lot more character development as far as she was concerned. And then sometimes people did things in this book, including Ijeoma herself. The characters would do things that didn't make sense or that weren't explained. And, you know, it's fine for you in a novel to, if you're a certain kind of character, to have an epiphany about something or have an experience that changes the way you feel about something, and that's clearly motivating your decision making. But, you know, again, and I think Nell said something similar in their review of this book, but you can't just have a character do something out of character as a plot contrivance and convenience. So yeah, I definitely was disappointed by this book, because again, the premise of it sounds like something that I would get on with quite well, but again, the execution I found lacking. So I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. It also felt more YA-ish to me than actual adult literary fiction. So I think maybe if you're somebody who likes YA books, you might get on with this better than I did. But yeah, 2.5 stars was not good for me. The next book I finished this week was Phillip Roth's Goodbye Columbus, which is the title is a novella, and then this also has 5 short stories in it. I really liked this, and this book has now taken the top spot in my favorite of Phillip Roth's books that I've read so far. And again, this is only the 4th book of his that I've read so far, so it's not a super long list, but this has now taken the top spot. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I think it's an excellent exploration of Jewish identity in the mid-20th century, negotiation of one's Jewishness against some sort of American context, whether that is you know, being a boy in a classroom or a religious school, or being in the army, or being in a relationship, etc., etc. So out of the 5 stories in the novella in here, 4 of the stories I thought were excellent, and the other 2 I didn't like as much, but they were still good. So yeah, I liked this a lot. There definitely are some misogynistic attitudes from some of the male characters toward the women characters in here, and I will say that with the exception of the title novella, Goodbye Columbus, I did not think the women characters were very well developed. They mostly served as nagging wives and or aunts or mothers. But in the title novella, it really centers on this relationship between Brenda and Neil. And I think Brenda's character is more fully three-dimensional there than any of the other female characters anywhere else in the book. So it's a very dude-centric book. So if you're all right with that, and if you like short stories and especially explorations of identity, or reconciliations of, you know, one's other identity with their American identity, I would definitely recommend this. So I gave this 4 stars. The next book I finished, I cannot talk about because it was for the BookTube prize, but I did just want to say that I finished listening to, because this was an audiobook that I was listening to, David Zucchino's Wilmington's Lie, the 1898 Coup and the Rise of White Supremacy, I think is the title of it. But anyway, whatever the actual title is, I'll put it down in the description box below. So I finished this. This was the first of my 6 books in the octafinals round of the BookTube prize that I have finished. So, and I've already recorded my thoughts elsewhere to make like a full, you know, vlog once the quarterfinals round is underway. So I finished that. And then the last book that I finished this week, I finished just this morning, and that was Justin Phillip Reed's volume of poetry, the Malevolent volume. So I also really liked this overall. I gave it 4 stars. It is a challenging volume, both in terms of its form and in terms of its content, because Justin Phillip Reed employs his own poetic devices in here, so they're not necessarily always forms that you're familiar with. Although I think, you know, if you're somebody who reads poetry casually, like nothing in here is good. You're not going to be like, what the heck is that? You know? But I'm just saying he employs his own poetic devices, some of which he mentions in the endnotes to the volume. But also, this volume is really concerned with bucking conventions for poetry to humanize African Americans. And Reed really articulates that in a poem late in the collection called, I think it's called When I Was a Poet. And I really wish that poem had come earlier in the volume, although it did sort of nicely tie everything together for me, but I wish it had come earlier because then I feel like I would have had a better understanding of what he was doing throughout the volume. But yeah, so basically Reed is going against this idea that poetry, especially by African American poets, should be intended to humanize Black people or make white readers or other readers feel sympathetic to the sufferings of African Americans. So instead, he really leans into darkness and he leans into white fears of Black monstrosity. And so it creates this whole vibe in the poetry collection that's kind of unsettling and a little disturbing. But I think he does a good job of accomplishing that goal. But yeah, I think this is not going to be a collection that everyone will get on with. It certainly is not something you should pick up and read if you're looking for something light or inspirational. So I would probably recommend it mainly to people who appreciate poetry that's a little bit more experimental. And again, it's not that the poems themselves are difficult to read, it's just that it's difficult to appreciate what Reed is doing in this collection. By the way, thank you to Mark Nash for recommending this volume, and I look forward to whatever your other recommendation is that you're planning to give later this month. So I will definitely be on the lookout for that. So yeah, 4 stars. So that was everything I finished this week. So in terms of what I'm currently reading, Melissa of Fully Booked and I are still doing our buddy read of Moby-Dick. We are very close to the halfway point, so by the time I do my next Friday Reads video, we will be over halfway done with Moby-Dick. Woohoo! But we're still enjoying that. I also started my second book for the BookTube Prize, which is Inferno by Catherine Cho. I'm also listening to this as an audiobook, so I can't really say anything else about it, just that I'm also listening to that right now. I'm also currently reading, although I'm not very far in, The Death of Vivek Oji for Scott and Nell's Read Under the Bed book group. So I'm really hoping to make significant progress in that over the weekend, if not finish it entirely. And I've also just recently started Muriel Sparks' The Mandelbaum Gate. This is for the Barter Horde's Backlist Book Club, so I'm only really 20 pages into this, so I don't have a ton of thoughts about it so far, but it's set in Israel in 1961, so Israel is only like not even 15 years old at this point as a country, and it centers on this woman named Barbara Vaughn, who is a half-Jewish convert to Roman Catholicism. And yeah, I don't really know too much more about it than that, but I will let you know as I progress. So over the weekend, I have a couple of goals because Doris is hosting her mid-month book bash over this weekend. So that lasts from today, Friday, through Monday. So I want to, one, finish Catherine Cho's Inferno, which seems really doable because this is a 6.5 hour long audiobook and I'm already 90 minutes into it, so that seems pretty doable. I also want to make very good progress, if not finish entirely, The Death of Vivek Oji, which, because this is a novella, also seems doable. I want to make some decent progress in The Mandelbaum Gate. And then I will also be starting another buddy read with Lindsay of Lindsay's Book Life of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, I've heard really good things about this. I don't think I've heard one bad thing about this book, so I'm definitely excited to read this with Lindsay. I will also be starting, I don't know if I'll get to it over the weekend or I'll leave it, until next week, but I did check out from the library The Deep by River Solomon, which this is not the kind of book I would normally pick up and read because it is fantasy, but I've heard very good things about it, both from Beth Ann Bruninger Sokolar and from Scott and Nell at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. So it's also short, it's 160 pages, so I'm willing to give it a go and we'll see how I like it. So that is everything, I'm pretty sure. That's everything I either read or I'm currently reading or I'm about to start reading. So please let me know if you have thoughts about any of these books. I would love to hear that. Thank you for watching this. I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?